near home, near their support networks.
Tonight, she needs a kidney and home-based dialysis until she gets one.
Our vision is to have every schools taught in our language.
Money talks. The feds pledge to pump millions into northern language retention. And Hockey Night in Cree is back for another season. Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward. Welcome to APTN National News. We begin tonight in the north, where the doctor who guided Nunavut through the COVID pandemic is leaving the post of Chief Public Health Officer. Dr. Michael Patterson was the Chief Public Health Officer for the territory for the last 4 years and is remaining in Nunavut to work at the hospital in Iqaluit. When COVID-19 hit, he became a near constant voice on television and radio, taking questions from reporters and residents alike for hours at a time. In this clip, he's using a little Inuktitut to help make his point about isolating.
One way for people to think about it is think about how they would react during a a blizzard. Apologies for my accent. But to, hunker down and wait it out in that same fashion and only go out when it's absolutely necessary.
First Nation leaders and the BC government are gathering in Vancouver over the next 2 days to improve their relationship. The parties will work on implementing the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. It is the 7th BC Cabinet and First Nation leaders gathering, the first in-person meeting in 2 years due to the pandemic and floods that devastated the province. According to BC, this year will be the largest meeting to date, with 208 First Nations being represented. In 2019, BC passed the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act into law. BC Assembly of First Nations Terry Teague says other provinces now look at BC for leadership.
They're looking to us. They're looking to British Columbia for leadership. They're looking to British Columbia to develop, which is my file, a national action plan to implement the Declaration, Bill C-15. And certainly we do have that experience here in British Columbia, as we do have the 89 commitments on our action plan. We have 5 years, and to align many of the colonial laws with the United Nations Declaration.
A woman in the Yukon with kidney failure is undergoing dialysis out of territory because the treatment she says she needs isn't being offered there. Sarah Connors tells us she's appealing to the public in hopes of finding a living donor for a kidney transplant.
At age 9, Vuntut Gwich'in citizen Nellie Najutli's kidneys failed, and she underwent a successful kidney transplant. But earlier this summer, Najutli began experiencing kidney issues and traveled to Vancouver for care. Doctors there discovered the 29-year-old's kidney had rejected, and she was ultimately diagnosed with end-stage renal disease, though her situation is treatable.
I was brought to emerge, wheeled upstairs, and I got my central line put into my chest, and dialysis was started right away, and I have been on dialysis since.
Najutli has been in Vancouver since June. 3 times a week, she receives hemodialysis, a process where a machine takes blood from her body, filters out the toxins in her blood, and returns it to her body, just as a kidney would. But Najutli says she's unable to return home because hemodialysis is not offered in a hospital setting in the Yukon.
People want to be near home, near their support networks, near their friends and family when they're going through a health crisis. And there's more than one person in the Yukon who requires dialysis.
While insurance pays for an apartment and a meal allowance, Najutli is living off her savings until she can come home.
Being on dialysis here is a bit of it's just a constant, never-ending uphill battle.
The territory is advocating for home-based dialysis, where patients can administer their own care. But Najutli says it's not an option for everyone. She says she lives alone and wouldn't have help. She also rents an apartment and would have to make alterations, something she's unable to do as a renter.
I believe in our healthcare system to find a way to fill that need and fill that gap.
It's always terrible being taken away from family and friends and having to spend your time in Vancouver, in hospital, away from your loved ones.
Anne Huang is with the Kidney Foundation of Canada, BC, and Yukon branch. She says there's typically around 4 to 10 people in the Yukon undergoing dialysis at any time.
The main obstacle of getting an in-territory unit would be the fact that we just don't have enough people who are in need of dialysis right now to justify the cost.
Huang says in-territory care is important because it can take years to receive a kidney transplant. But getting that transplant is life-changing.
The impact of having a kidney rather than be on dialysis means that you can live your life freely as you wish. Being on dialysis means that you're stuck in a hospital. You're going to hospital 3 times a week, sometimes more, sometimes less, but it means you don't have the freedom to do things that you like.
I'm really excited. I miss home, I miss the snow, and I miss the cold.
Najutli is eligible for a less intensive form of dialysis and hopes to be back in Whitehorse in the new year. She's now sharing her story online and through social media in hopes of finding a living donor where she would likely have a better success rate. Until then, it's a waiting game until she can come home.
I'm really excited to get back home and see my friends and family and also get back to work.
Sarah Connors, APTN National News, Whitehorse.
The territories can expect nearly $40 million in new federal funding for Indigenous language revitalization. Indigenous leaders welcomed the announcement in Deda, Northwest Territories. Here's Charlotte Moore-Jacobs with more.
Organizations like the Yellowknives Dene First Nation now have more money to put into work necessary to strengthen the Willowday language.
Our vision is to have every schools taught in our language, starting from kindergarten all the way to graduation. And it's so important because as of today, we don't have much speakers in our languages.
Northwest Territories Member of Parliament Michael McLeod made the announcement on November 25th at the Deda Community Centre.
As a person that attended residential school, I understand firsthand the intergenerational impacts that the system has had on the destruction of Indigenous languages, culture, and identity. So today, I'm pleased to announce a $39.4 million investment in Indigenous languages here in the Northwest Territories, Nunavut, and Yukon.
This $39.4 million is part of more than $77 million the federal government has provided for Indigenous languages in the North since 2019.
There's a total of 55 projects that are being added. And the money that is being distributed is there's $6.9 million for Northwest Territories, 17.7 in Nunavut, and 14.7 million in Yukon.
Money will go towards things such as language and culture camps, language-based initiatives, translation, mentor apprenticeship programs, and language instructor training and more.
At the very threat, but this funding will help us continue and to reach out to the speakers in the community where we can use and utilize the elders so that we can continue having workshop, cultural camps, many camps, so that we can bring back our language. Language are very important.
Along with community-based initiatives, the funding will also support each of the 4 Inuit land claim organizations in developing and implementing their own Indigenous language strategies.
The issue of multi-year funding has been one that has been raised for quite a while, for many, many years. Indigenous governments, Indigenous organizations, and others have raised the fact that it was hard to plan, hard to develop strategies when it's a year-to-year funding allocation, and it's also time-consuming to have to apply on an annual basis. So I think a lot of people are applauding the idea of having multi-year funding.
Charlotte Moore-Jacobs, APTN National News, Dada.
We always want to hear what you have to say about anything you see here. Here's how you can continue the conversation. You can send us an email to news@aptn.ca or leave a comment on aptnnews.ca. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. Follow APTN News to join the conversation and see our latest stories. Priorities for Métis women was the topic of discussion this morning in Ottawa. The Senate Standing Committee on Indigenous Peoples is examining the federal government's constitutional and legal responsibilities to Indigenous peoples. Today's witness was President Melanie Ominaho of the Les Femmes Michif Otipimswak. Health, housing, climate change, and missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls were just a few of the issues Ominaho spoke of as priorities for Métis women. Senator Brian Francis asked her if an oversight committee on MMIWG could help implement the calls for justice. She responded that it's crucial for change.
I'm going to be frank. At this point in time, there have been many things that have said they're doing this and they're doing that, and nothing has really actually happened or affected any change at a ground level. And we need to make sure that resources that are coming and made available for missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls are not spent building bureaucracies. They're not spent on administrative things. They're spent on actually affecting change at the ground level where Métis women and other Indigenous women are.
Just who should regulate the online gaming industry? That's a question the Mohawk Council of Ganawage, or MCK, wants to know. It's taking Ontario and the Attorney General of Ontario to that province's Supreme Court. At stake are potentially millions of dollars. The Mohawk Council of Ganawage hosts and regulates online gambling sites from around the world. But regardless of their origin, online gaming sites that reach Ontarians must register with iGaming Ontario. MCK says that could block access to Ontario's online gaming market, and they could lose millions of dollars of revenue for their community. Canada's criminal code does say provinces should regulate gambling, but MCK says it has already had jurisdiction over gaming for decades.
We've been involved for 25 years. We have our own law and gaming commission, which is world-renowned, signed MOUs across this globe with other jurisdictions. The only place that it's not recognized is here in our own backyard.
Still to come, a former gang member has created a clothing line to help keep himself and others from becoming repeat offenders. Stay with us. Welcome back. Finding employment with a criminal record can be difficult. That's how it was for former gang member Sean Ryland. So he started Red Rebel Armor, an Indigenous clothing line to help reduce recidivism. Here's APTN's Kenneth Jackson with the story.
So there we go, finished product. So we put that there, and then the next phase is it gets folded, and once it gets folded, we place it over here, which is awaiting being actually packaged.
This is Sean Rayland's life today, a businessman and owner of Red Rebel Armor in Winnipeg, Manitoba. But it's not your typical clothing company. Red Rebel Armor has another goal on top of making money.
So Red Rebel Armor is an Indigenous-led streetwear brand on a social mission to reduce recidivism by creating employment opportunities for our relatives getting out of the criminal justice system. So we provide on-the-job paid training in a culturally safe work environment. And yeah, that's essentially it. And we create some crazy-ass streetwear. We're printing it ourselves, marketing it, selling it. We're in local retailers. We're at the Hudson's Bay. We got our own e-commerce, and we're just really growing this business so we could create more employment opportunities.
Raylan is a former gang member and knows what it's like to get out of jail, only to find out there's no supports or jobs for people like him. It's easier to fall back into the life that led them to jail in the first place.
Whether that's, hey, somebody needs a beating or they need a slap or give you $100 or whatever it is, it's so easy to get out and find that. But to go get a job, you already got your criminal record on you, you need IDs to get IDs, you're facing addictions. It's easy to see why Indigenous Joe is going back to jail. When you understand that he's getting out with a criminal record, he's getting out to the same community, the same environment that existed. So those conditions that eventually sent him to jail or that he was thriving in that sent him to jail are still there. So he's going back into that same environment.
That's why he started Red Rebel Armor, to give people a chance and show them a different type of hustle.
It's a good hustle too, it's good. I can't snort my t-shirts at night, I can't smoke them up, right? I can wake up, I'll tell you something that I was working with an individual and he said, Sean, after he printed a shirt, he's like, so I could sell this t-shirt and I don't have to worry about the cops or any enemies and it's the same price as a piece of crack. And I said, yeah, exactly. You got it already. It's just applying your hustle to something positive. So that was like, yeah, that was huge. I was so happy that that individual had that epiphany because that's what I was trying to teach.
APTN Investigates reported last week there's approximately 40 street gangs in Winnipeg, and they're largely Indigenous-led, mainly because of extreme poverty and government policies that have trapped them there.
I think a lot of this people know that if we don't pay attention to our young people, they're going to stray. And so we have a lot of young people that are born into wounded families and wounded situations. And, you know, I'm not assigning blame at all because it's you know, there's a history in this country of colonialism and suffering. And there's a consequence to that. And the consequence to that is generationally wounded people. And, you know, we have young people being born into some pretty wounded, chaotic situations, and they're off and running. They find each other, they're out at night, they feed off each other, and things get crazy.
That's why today, more than ever, there needs to be more opportunities, a chance for a different path. It's just a matter of showing the youth, says Raylan.
I don't hate on the hustle. I don't hate on the drug game because I know some people are still, that's their survival. It's helping them. It's just there's a better way. You got the skills to use them in a healthy way. We just need more opportunities like that, especially for entrepreneurship.
That's something Raylan is trying to do. One t-shirt at a time. Kenneth Jackson, APTN National News, Winnipeg, Manitoba.
And you can watch Kenneth's episode of APTN Investigates on Crime in Winnipeg on our website, aptnnews.ca. Hockey Night in Canada in Cree is returning to APTN. Details on that and more coming up after the break. Welcome back. Time now for our photo of the day. And this looks pretty amazing. Charlene Poley and her granddaughter created a large dream catcher made of lights that can be seen along Highway 105 near Kitigan, ZB, Quebec. Definitely getting in the spirit of the holidays. Great work. We want to see your photos. You can send them to share at aptn.ca for the chance to be featured as our next photo of the day. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Starting on the East Coast, 8 with showers in Halifax, 5 in Charlottetown. 0 in Nain, minus 17 in Kuujjuaq. 8 with showers in Montreal, snow and minus 1 in Chibougamau. Plus 1 with snow in Sault Ste. Marie, flurries and 5 in North Bay. Minus 4 with snow in Thunder Bay, 8 below in Sioux Lookout with snow. Minus 15 and flurries in God's Lake, 17 below in Norway House. 11 below with snow in Winnipeg, minus 13 in Dauphin. Minus 15 in Regina, 17 below for Saskatoon. Minus 16 in Meadow Lake with snow, 21 below in La Ronge. In northern Alberta, minus 24 with snow in High Level, 17 below and snow in Fort McMurray. Minus 14 with snow in Edmonton, 13 below in Lethbridge. 0 in Vancouver, rain and plus 3 in Victoria. Minus 13 with snow in Prince George, sunny and minus 21 in Dease Lake. Minus 22 in Old Crow and Whitehorse. Minus 21 in Yellowknife, snow and 22 below in Norman Wells. Minus 28 for Sax Harbor, 29 below in Pawlutuk. Minus 33 in Baker Lake and Whale Cove. 33 below for Resolute and Igloo Lake. It's back and just days away. APTN has announced the dates for the 2022-23 season of Hockey Night in Canada in Cree. And all the regular players will be back. Host Earl Wood, studio panelists John Chabot and Jason Chamakis, and play-by-play announcer Clarence Iron. These are all Saturday games, just like the old days. The Calgary Flames will try to burn the Leafs in Toronto on December 10th. The Oilers take on the Canucks in Vancouver on January 21st. And the Ottawa Senators are in Montreal for a match against Les Canadiens, February 25th. And Edmonton will try to ground the Jets in downtown Winnipeg. That's an afternoon game on March 4th. And no fooling, the Leafs and Senators go head-to-head on April 1st. Exciting stuff. A new episode of Face to Face is coming up tonight right after the news. Our guest is residential school survivor Lorraine Seymour. Seymour says she entered into a state of depression when the news of suspected unmarked graves at the former Kamloops residential school went public.
Got really sad. Not that because I didn't know it, I always knew it. I always knew there was people that didn't come back, and my friends and my family always talked about, Charlie Wenjack and him freezing, trying to walk from CJ to where he came from and where he died on the tracks. And my parents always told us which way he went, and they made sure that we committed to not running away, to survive this place. Yeah.
You can catch that episode right here in less than 2 minutes. And be sure to join us tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern Time when Daryl puts women in leadership in focus. That's all the time we have for your APTN National News for this Tuesday. For news anytime, you can visit our website, aptnnews.ca. I'm Dennis Ward. Stick around. Face to Face is next. Have a great night.